The morning I found a car in my garage, I thought I was still half asleep until the owner of the car smiled at me and said, "It's for the community." That's when the world tilted, and nothing after that felt normal. My name's Ethan Cole, and I used to think neighborhood problems ended with noisy parties and bad lawn care. That was before Marla Winslow decided she owned everyone's life. We live in Maple Ridge, quiet streets, porches, one traffic light at the end of the lane. I like the routine. I like the way Mrs. Caldwell waters her roses at dawn. That morning the garage door rolled up, and there was a black sedan parked snug between my lawn mower and a stack of paint cans, steam rising from a paper cup on the hood like it belonged there. Marla was in the driver's seat, perfectly calm, clipboard. "I thought it was a community space," she said, stepping out with that look that said she'd rehearsed righteous indignation. When I told her the spot was mine, she laughed in a way that sounded like thunder under a calm sky and said the neighborhood needed accountability. She had the HOA badge pinned to her sweater like armor. That's when I learned what one person's righteousness can look like unchecked. Act 1 was quiet at first, a series of small injustices that put thin cracks in the day-to-day. Marla started calling meetings about shared usage and community fairness, and people showed up because she'd learned the language that sounds grown-up: bylaws, covenants, enforcement. She'd bring slides and a projector, and a crowd that nodded while she framed me as an obstacle to safety, to unity. It felt absurd. Staged a projector in our cul-de-sac one night and played a montage of my yard's vile. My friends told me to laugh it off. My neighbor Nia said, "Don't feed her theater," and Marcus, who'd been a cop for 20 years, told me to document everything. I put up cameras. I saved every text and pamphlet she dropped at my door. I took careful notes because people like Marla build narratives. If you don't keep receipts, you become a character in their story. Act 2 is where things got deliberate. When you see how a small grievance becomes a campaign, you notice the pattern, the frothing, the escalation. It began with late-night flyers accusing me of blocking communal access. Then my trash cans were tipped over in the morning, contents spilling like confetti on the curb. Someone slashed a tarp over Marcus's truck. Packages were lost in transit, always the ones with small, private things in them. It was subtle enough to be deniable, public enough to smear. One night my camera caught Marla and 2 others on my property, moving a reserved sign and taking pictures. When I knocked on her door the next day, she smiled and told me, "We're protecting the neighborhood." I wanted to say, "Protect from whom?" "From me." But I breathed, collected the footage, and took it to a lawyer. The neighborhood split. Some wanted a spectacle, others wanted calm, and Marla found both by stoking outrage, then offering herself as the solution. She staged rallies with borrowed bullhorns, and neighbors I'd known for years whispered into their phones, asking which side to take. At the HOA meeting where she moved to formally reassign my driveway, she was theatrical. She pointed at me across a room of folding chairs and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "This man puts his own convenience above us." Her words were polished, practiced, they stuck. I felt something inside me bend. I remember standing on my porch afterward, the summer air heavy, feeling like I'd become visible in a way I never asked for, like the town had turned a spotlight on me and forgotten I was a person with a life. My wife Mara kept to the kitchen, leaving me to answer texts and neighborly questions. She would later tell me she feared for our quiet more than she feared for the law. That small confession that she worried about normal more than justice cut through me harder than any flyer. The middle of the story is about evidence and the strange comfort it gives. Marcus and I combed through footage, her loading signs into a car, late-night gazebo meetings, a neighbor recording her whispering about making an example. We compiled it into a sequence, a documentary of escalation. I didn't go public because spectacle is what she craved, but when an inspector found no violation at my property and the county attorney began to look into intimidation, the restraint felt justified. Then things turned dangerous. It's one thing to put flyers on a mailbox, it's another when your shed is set on fire and a neighbor calls you at midnight saying, "Smoke." The shed charred to a black silhouette that looked like a warning rather than an accident. We filed reports. Marla said it wasn't her. She smiled and said, "You're making drama." That night, replaying camera footage in a dim kitchen, I saw a figure slip down the side of the house, hood up, moving quick as a shadow. She escalated again. This time she brought people who didn't live on our street, hired muscle. Men who stood at the edge of meetings and laughed when I spoke. They prowled on weekends like a bad chorus in a play gone off book. Once, someone left glossy flyers showing a manipulated photo of my house with community hazard stamped across it. Harassment shed its disguise and showed its true face. Intimidation made public. Act 3 begins at the garage. The final act is short and sharp. One Sunday morning, Marla drove a truck into my garage door not by accident. She hit it hard enough to bend the metal, dent the frame, and when I stepped outside, she threw her hands up and screamed, "I'm protecting everyone." The man with her took a hammer to the lawn ornament my neighbor cherished, then laughed as if this were comic relief. Marcus called the sheriff. She was arrested that day, not because I shouted, but because evidence and witnesses lined up like railroad ties, each one steady and impossible to ignore. The county charged her with property damage and intimidation. In the courtroom, she looked shocked, like someone who thought rules applied to other people. Her supporters were few, but a lot of neighbors sat in the gallery with that hollow, watchful expression, curiosity mixed with remorse. After the trial, some people offered apologies that felt like patches on a torn shirt. But the ending wasn't neat. You don't get tidy when people have spent months poisoning trust. Some neighbors still avoided my eyes, and the next HOA meeting felt like peeling a scab, necessary, messy, and slow. Marla moved away eventually, but she left a question. How does a community hold power without becoming a weapon? How do we balance rules with tolerance for difference? Those arguments don't end with a gavel. They keep circling. I learned a few practical things. Keep receipts, keep your voice measured, and when someone tries to paint you as a villain, don't let the narrative close. But I learned something harder. Moral certainty is seductive, and when someone offers to be the arbiter of right and wrong, people find it comforting to follow even if the path ends in harm. The cameras helped, the law helped, but what really shifted things was neighbors remembering we're human first, judges of each other second. There's a fragile muscle in every neighborhood trust, and once it's strained, you have to work to rebuild it with small, steady acts rather than grand proclamations. So here's what I want from you, and tell me in the comments, because I want to hear. When someone in power says they act for the common good, where's the line between enforcement and cruelty? When a neighborhood fights, are we protecting safety or polishing our sense of moral superiority at someone else's expense? If you were me, what would you have done differently when the first flyers hit your porch? If this made you think of your own street, drop your story below. If you lean one way, property rights above, I'll explain why. If you think community standards shouldn't be left to one loud voice, say that too. Share this video if it struck a chord, and if you want more stories like this, subscribe and ring the bell. I'll keep telling them. But most of all, tell me, where do we draw the line between protection and possession? I'm still trying to figure that out, and I want to hear your side.